I've never been real keen on predicting exact dates for events, but you might want to mark your calendars for this one. January 11th, 2019, and I'll explain a little bit later on in the video why I think that particular date is going to mark an event. Abby Martin has, on behalf of the Empire Files, done an amazing job maintaining journalistic integrity. A long time ago, a guy named Rush Limbaugh characterized our mainstream media as the drive-bys. And it was a very prescient statement. I don't agree with the man on a lot, but he was right about the tactic, the technique, the drive-by style of journalism. Abby Martin is the exact opposite of that. She maintains journalistic integrity, the little antithesis of our mainstream media. And not only does she have this gift to be able to drive down to the core of a story, recently I realized that she is actually an artist and was completely unaware. Now it's pretty deep stuff. This is her. This is abbymartin.org, and she has a lot of different artwork here. You'd be well served just to take a minute and take a look at this kind of stuff. Apparently, you can even have it on a shirt. This is, I think, her with one of her original pieces on a tank top. But this interview that she did recently with Randy Credico breaks down the story of Roger Stone, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, everything involved in that. It's out of my wheelhouse, I'll be very honest with you. I haven't talked about it here. I've tried to maintain focus on 3 or 4 other things. But if you really want to see what journalistic integrity is about, how you can use contextualization to create a narrative, a timeline that makes sense, watch this interview. I will link it down in the description. Now, as far as the date goes, there has been an oopsie daisy by USA Today. You see, in this continual drive for regime change in Venezuela, USA Today dropped this article. Maduro is consolidating power in Venezuela. The international community must intervene. All right, now they've laid this page out very, very weird. It's like the entire width of the screen with this picture, and it's hard to get everything in. But in the first picture, they show this picture of him on a mural, but in the foreground, here's all of your quote-unquote starving people. And I'll just let this picture speak for itself. But one thing that people don't realize, and once again, I apologize for the layout because I can't really zoom in without losing the context. I'll read it for you. It says, Venezuela's collapse over the past few years has shocked the world, terrorized the population, destabilized the region. Nicolas Maduro's slide into autocratic rule, blah, blah, blah. But in just a few weeks, on January 10, Maduro's regime will lose its last remaining veneer, however thin it may be, of legitimacy. I wonder what that is. From that date on, he will no longer be the democratically elected leader of Venezuela, and the international community will have the chance to add new momentum to its long-running pressure campaign. You see, he hasn't technically been re-inaugurated yet. You see, back in 2013, when Chavez died, there was an election, and he won. And the world, including the United States and everyone in South America, recognized the election. Now, nothing has changed. Nicolas Maduro has been in power this entire time. There has been a financial problem, but we have delineated the reasons for that. The drop in the price of oil, the sanctions, the declaring them a national threat, all this nonsense that has caused these problems. You're seeing the same stories out of Iran now that you were seeing out of Venezuela. Lack of medicine, lack of food, hyperinflation. All of that comes from U.S. sanctions, not from socialism. Is Iran socialist? No. But you're seeing the exact same effect. It's the sanctions, not the government. Now, why would, and you need to ask yourself this question, why would the United States recognize the 2013 election of Nicolas Maduro that he won here, but not recognize the one from last May? The difference is the result. And I know this is going to be a hard thing, not a hard thing, but it's going to be complicated to wrap your mind around. The powers that be need division. And this election here showed division, just like in our country. Every election divided right down the middle. What they can't have is unity. And that's what the 2013 election showed. Pardon me. That's what the 2018 election showed. The recent one. That the country got behind this leader. And the U.S. cannot have that. They cannot have that at all. Why would the United States and the world recognize the 2013 election, but not the 2018 election? That's what you need to ask yourself. So when the official, unrecognized election results lead to Mr. Maduro being inaugurated 10 January 2019, I think 11 January 2019, we might see something happen. See, this is the oops that I'm talking about. They reveal this here, that the U.S. and everyone else, the Lima Group, recognized the 2013 election of Nicolas Maduro, where he beat this guy, Enrique Capriles Radonsky. And over the last 6 years, we have seen the U.S. try to kill the guy. We have seen him try all sorts of problems. Colombia, the sanctions, everything else. And none of it's worked. So now this is their last hope. This is their final bulwark. They're going to use this, saying, well, we couldn't do anything up until 10 January because technically he was the legitimate leader because he won this election. And they're not going to want you to ask that question. How did he win this election if Chavez was so unpopular? If the country was in such a terrible state, if it was such a bad, road to go down for the leadership, once Chavez died, how did he win here? And if he won here as a result of some kind of fraud or some kind of a problem, because remember, Chavez was in charge here. Okay, this was an election that the U.S. and the world recognized, even though the Chavistas were in power. Why would they recognize this election and not the 2018 election? What do you think changed? Nothing changed. The only thing that really did change is unity. And ironically, the people that are trying to overthrow Mr. Maduro call themselves the Democratic Unity Roundtable. And in Spanish, the acronym is MUD, M-U-D, which is hilarious. But for those of you who want to really know what this was all about, we've talked about this at length, but I'm going to talk about it again to remind folks that are new to the channel. Why were there problems in 2014, 15, 16 in Venezuela? Why did they lose the ability to import food? They imported food because they did not have agriculture in their country to support their people. Why? Most of their people worked in the oil industry. Now, why is that? Well, you have to go back. You have to see when big oil went down there and made all of these false and fake promises that re-geared their society to working on oil rigs and not in agriculture. They made a ton of money when oil was high, so they imported food. Unfortunately, this put them in a very tough position. It basically left them slaves to big oil and the powers that be. So when the U.S. and Saudi Arabia decided to crater oil prices in 2015 and destroy their income, the rest of the world, all of these other oil importing nations, they were able to go seek loans to get through the time of low prices. Venezuela was singled out and sanctioned. Now you'd have to ask yourself again, why would the U.S. single out Venezuela? Why would they just pick on this poor country? Well, it has to go, you once again have to understand what happened in this country in 1975. See, the last time we had an oil crisis, we passed a law that said U.S. oil companies could not sell oil pumped in the United States for profit. So all these big oil corporations had to go to other countries, pump their oil, and sell it for profit. First on the list, Venezuela, right in our own backyard. So that's what they did. They went down there and treated their population like a plantation, paid them dirt wages, no worker protections, made money hand over fist. Well, when Chavez took over, he stopped all that. And that started to cut into the bottom line of all these big oil corporations. So when in 2015, fast forward, when we lifted the ban on selling U.S. oil for profit, we needed customers for U.S. oil. But there was a problem. We couldn't just dump all of this oil on the market without cratering it. We needed to have customers. So who was customer number one? Customer number one was China. And I'll give you these links. This is World Top Exports. In that time frame, 2014 to 2017, the United States increased its exports of oil to China. You ready for this number? 318,254,300% in that time. All of these other countries, Saudi Arabia, exports of oil to China, down 50%. Angola, exports of oil to China, down 37%. Iraq, exports of oil to China, down 23%. Oman, exports of oil to China, down 39%. Iran, exports of oil, down to China, 30%. U.S. exports of oil to China, up 318,254,300%. And here, when you talk about the drop in oil prices destroying the economies of other countries, of the top 15 exporters, count them, 2 countries during that time actually increased the value of their exports. What were those 2 countries? The United States and Iraq. The U.S. increased its value of exported oil in that time 328%. Iraq, 0.6. Everybody else at that time, from Saudi Arabia, they lost money. They got clobbered when the U.S. glutted the market. This is what happened to Venezuela. This is where their income went. It had nothing to do with the collapse of evil, terrible, horrible socialism. It's bullshit. It is the largest source of untapped oil in the world, and they're saying the second. I think it's the largest untapped source of gold. And that's what they're hiding in Brazil and Venezuela, that there is an enormous amount of gold down there. And this is what's happening. But of course they have to control the media to show you a whole different story to keep you on board for the sanctions, for destroying this country. This is what happened. And this is going to be the fundamental basis for the invasion when it happens. Ask yourself, and I'll say it again, and I know I keep harping the same point, why would the U.S. recognize the election that happened in 2013 where Nicolas Maduro won? Yes, only by 2%, but he won. They recognize that, but they don't recognize the election that happened in 2018, simply because the people that were running against him realized they couldn't win, so they pulled out of the election to make it seem as if it was fraudulent. I mean, seriously, think about this. What if the Democrats decided to pull out of the election at the last minute, and everybody went to the polls, and the only people who voted were Republicans, and the results came out, and the only people that showed up were Republicans, Green Party, Libertarian Party, and whatever? Of course it would show this massive, huge slide in the direction of the Republicans. Would that make it a problem? Would that make it fraudulent? No. It just meant that the second largest party, or one of the 2 largest parties, decided not to participate. That's not reflected here. That's reflected in the results from 2018, where Nicolas Maduro had like 68% or something like that. It's crazy. They pulled out to keep this guy from having credibility. to make you think that it was some kind of a rigged election when it wasn't. But mark my words, that day is coming. This happens in Mexico too. This has been a huge surprise to the United States. Lopez Obrador, he actually supports Nicolas Maduro, and he's going to stand with them. And those are two very, very large oil suppliers in this hemisphere, Mexico and Venezuela. So we could be looking at a problem the day after. 1119, as if that didn't have any relevance. But the only places you're going to find stories like this are here. Empire Files, Abby Martin. If you haven't seen this girl's artwork, it is amazing. It really is. It's stunning. It was a side I didn't know existed. In fact, I think I'm probably going to buy a couple of these, to be truthful. So, anyway, we will leave it there. Check this out if you have a chance, and we will see you next time. Like, share, subscribe.